This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Gary Taylor.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Although my name is mentioned in the opening jingle, in this episode I have little to do, and there is a very good reason for that. Because in this episode I handed over the AMHT microphone to Steve Waddingham, the Aston Martin Lagonda historian and AMHT trustee, to lead on this one. Also, we have gone a little rogue with this podcast, for though it is under the Aston Martin Heritage banner, it has little to do with Aston Martin. Yes, I know, but do not panic, for Steve is talking pre-war Lagonda, and I think most AM enthusiasts and owners love a Lagonda. And of course, Lagonda in later years became part of the Aston Martin family. Steve has uncovered a lovely story about a lady named Molly who was very recently reunited with a Lagonda after 84 years, which is quite unbelievable. A car she had childhood memories of when it was owned by her aunt. Steve admits he is a sucker for a good story, as we are, and this is one of those. So Steve, press record and let's go.
Growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Hello everyone, it's Steve Waddingham, company historian for Aston Martin Lagonda. This morning I did something quite unusual really. Certainly it's not unusual for me to be involved in tracking down cars or researching ownership history, but this particular one is very unusual. About 2 years ago, a lady wrote to me asking if we could help try and locate a pre-war Lagonda which had belonged to an aunt of hers in the late 1930s, early 40s. And I must admit, on the first read of that letter, I didn't really hold out much hope that the survival rate of pre-war Lagondas is actually quite low. It's almost the opposite to Aston, really, where lots of pre-war Astons survive, probably about 70% of them. Lagondas are the opposite way around. Anyway, long story short, using social media, picked up a lead, followed it, managed to find that the car was alive and well and it had been sold relatively recently through one of the well-known auctioneers. Basically, we tracked it down. Not only did we track it down, we discovered that the car lived just a few miles away from where the lady that wrote to me lives. So amazing coincidence. Anyway, various things have happened in between, bit of ill health, bad weather on one particular occasion, and it just never happened. The trying to get the lady to see the car didn't happen, and she wrote to me again a few weeks ago, and we tried again, and luckily the car hadn't moved. It was still in the same ownership, belongs to an overseas collector, keeps the car in the UK. Thankfully, with a load of help from a lovely chap called Jack, we were able to bring it all together today. So we met in the Cotswolds in a really lovely hotel called the Three Horseshoes. And yeah, first time in 84 years, this lady got to see her old favourite aunt's Lagonda. So really amazing background story on Molly, the lady in question. And also, by the sounds of it, quite an interesting story about the aunt. The aunt lived until the ripe old age of 104. And it sounds like she was a bit of a character. There may well be a part 3 to this story at some point, if we find out a little bit more about what she got up to. Whenever I'm looking at things to do with that period of history, you know, the first thing I think of is you've got a car from the 30s. Who was the owner and how did they get the car? What did they do? Because car ownership was obviously a rarity in that part of the century. You tend to find certainly on more expensive cars, that there's usually a story behind the owner. And another thing that struck me today as well in conversation, it turned out that she probably last saw the car in around about 1940. Again, if that's correct, 1940, you're in the sort of early years of World War II. Petrol was being rationed in the UK. And the only way you could really get hold of petrol was if you had a good reason to be using a car, or if you were involved in some kind of vital work. So again, it raises the question, you know, who was the lady? What did she do? How did she get the petrol to run the car, if indeed it was in that early part of the war? So maybe at some point we'll get to the bottom of those questions. and maybe there'll be a follow-up to this bit. So for now, I hope you enjoy the little bit that we've got for the podcast. We start off by talking to Molly and her friends around a table before the car arrived. And then once the car's arrived, we go out and it's literally, there we are looking at the car for the first time. Molly's reaction, it was fabulous. It ended up with Molly going for a little drive in the car. Amazing. Probably the first time in well over 80 years that she's actually sat in that very same car. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the piece. A little bit of history is going to be made today. I'm sat in a beautiful part of the Cotswolds. We are sat here around a lovely table with a lady called Molly, and we're waiting for a car to arrive. And the car that is actually on its way here is a 1934 Lagonda M45. Without further ado, let's say hello to Molly. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
Can you remember roughly when it would have been the last time you saw it?
Well, I was 8, so that would have been 1940.
1940. So 1940. So that in itself is quite interesting, because for anyone driving a car in 1940, first of all, you had to get hold of the petrol rations. So
Yeah.
Can you remember what your aunt used to do? What did she work?
She was very good. I've been telling Ruth about her, actually. She was quite a character.
Yeah.
And if anybody could get anything, she could. So it wasn't surprising. But my memory is of her driving down from London in the car. And I can remember standing by the car. Another cousin can remember going for a ride in it. And I saw her sort of at odd intervals throughout her life. She lived to 104. Wow. She was quite a goer. She used to, when she was young, she toured North Africa in a caravan.
Wow. I mean, imagine that, listener, touring Africa in a caravan, and that wouldn't have been the sort of caravan you get nowadays with a satellite dish on the roof. I mean, in the 1930s, that was, I'd imagine, quite hardcore.
Yes. She went on to be very successful in her own right. She finished up with a chain of greengrocers in London, and owned a lot of cherry orchards, apple orchards, and so on around in Berkshire. And when she was in her 90s, she was doing the stock market. So she was.
Wow.
She was.
That, I mean, again, in her 90s, she was doing the stock market. I mean, that's
very well.
And doing very well. Wow. And lived to 104.
Yeah.
Which nowadays, okay, even now, 104 is a good age, but going back a few decades, that would have been almost unheard of, wouldn't it?
But she was definitely the odd one out in the family. My mother, there were 7 girls and 1 boy, and Sylvia was next to the eldest. And Grandma, who was a very moderate person, always said, well, Sylvia's a little different.
Well, and the other thing I should explain as well is that Molly and I have been keeping in touch over the last 2 years. And recently you sent me your life story, which I have to say, I couldn't put it down. I've never read a book so quickly. I think it was just a riveting thing to read. Do you want to just tell us just a few little bits of your sort of life, if that's okay?
Yes, I think way back at the beginning, my favourite subject at school was always geography. And I suppose there was a subconscious wish to sort of go and see the world. And so when the chance arose in my mid-20s, I was working with a girl who was also willing to travel. So we went as £10 POMs to Australia. Spent a few years there, and then she stopped off to get married. So I eventually came back to this country and then went out to the Middle East and had time in Aden through all their troubles, but I loved it there. It was one of the happiest times of my life. And then went to Libya when Gaddafi took over, which wasn't quite so happy. He just made life difficult. And so when that came to an end, I came back to this country and did various things, such as working for Churchill's official biographer and various other things. And I've just just enjoyed everything because it's been bitty, I suppose, but I've enjoyed every bit of it, and I don't regret one moment. The only really sort of bad memory was going to South America on a cargo boat, which was an absolute disaster.
Was that? Yeah, because from memory, that was when you're on a cargo boat, because you also went on a banana boat as well, didn't you, at one point? Which sounds lovely, by the way. If anyone doesn't know what a banana boat is, if I remember, is it 12 passengers and a lap of luxury, really? Compared to other, first class dinner every night with the captain, that sort of thing. But the one when you went to South America, is that when you had the tooth abscess? I cannot imagine what that must have been like on a ship in the middle of nowhere with no medical or no medicine or anything. You just had to kind of tough it out. I mean, Molly, I have to say that one of the best things I've heard this year is when you said to me recently, nobody has any backbone anymore. And I think, being on a ship in the middle of nowhere without any drugs when you've got a tooth abscess, I cannot even begin to imagine.
People might also say it's very foolhardy.
But no, it's an incredible story. And also another recollection from the book is that, you talked about being in, I think it was when you were in Beirut, where you couldn't leave, basically.
Oh, in Libya, in Tripoli, yes.
Yeah.
Gaddafi decided to keep all our passports, so we were literally prisoners in the country, really.
Yeah.
The people who were out on leave were the lucky ones because they couldn't get back in. Wow. So they were away for weeks.
I was once in the Middle East. I won't say which country it was, but I had to hand my passport in because I was with a family, shall we say, that owned the country, so didn't have much choice really. And that was quite nerve-wracking because they basically let you go back when they're finished with you. But it was peaceful and it wasn't, I wasn't against my will. But so I can only imagine what it must have been like. It must have been quite terrifying.
It was, I think the main thought with everybody was if they became ill. There was a very good clinic out there, but it was limited. And anybody who was really ill would want to go home and knew that they couldn't. And he also changed something in the passports, which in a sense made them invalid. And he also did things like our car number plates had the initials LT, and we all had to go buy little pots of black paint to paint out the LT because it was British.
Right. And talking to cars, again, I remember in the book you bought yourself a brand new Fiat at one point.
Yeah.
And just tell us what happened with the Fiat.
Well, I parked it in the evening, and of course, in places like Aden, all the shopping takes place in the evening. So I'd been shopping, I came back, and I was a very new driver then, and it took me ages to park, and I finished up about 2 yards away from the pavement, so I was wriggling about trying to get in closer. And in the end, I thought, I've had enough, and I just left it. And it took me maybe 30 seconds to get into my flat, and just as I went in to open the door, there was a huge explosion, and of course, nothing had happened up until that date. It was a peaceful, quiet place. And it took a few minutes to register that it was somewhere near the block of flats. So I contacted a lady upstairs whose husband was in the police and was up country. And she said, well, I'll come down and have a look for you. And we got down, of course, the car was, all the glass was smashed, the tyres were split. So I didn't think much about it. I thought, well, that's it. And the next day I went into work, and I worked for the Commissioner of Police. He said, well, are you all right? And I said, yes, and carried on working. But in the evening, one of the detectives called me and said, I think you must be suffering from shock. So he said, would you like to come over to the compound and spend the evening here, which I did. And I was there for about an hour, and he was called out to an incident because this was the start of the terrorism. And so he was called out to an incident where 2 of our soldiers were killed, I think, and then came back. And of course, I was left on my own at that point, suffering from shock. And he came back, and we had a drink and sat and talked. And
quite experienced by the sound of it. I mean, yeah, this is definitely a new one. I don't think we've ever had anyone on the podcast before that's been in a terror attack, certainly not from all those years ago. But yeah, obviously quite frightening. But I believe the Fiat did actually get fixed and you kept it a long time, didn't you?
Fiat patched it up, yes, because I'd only had it 4 weeks. It was brand new, shiny, and they patched it up, and I brought it back to this country and drove it for a year or whatever I was allowed to have it. But it went through quite a few episode.
The one careful lady owner when you sold the car, presumably in the advert, but little did they know.
Funniest thing was, I must have been in shock and obviously didn't realise. In the morning, I went out, got in the car and drove it to work, and because there were no tyres, they were all split, there was broken glass all over the car, and I just drove to work and there were bunches of Arabs standing on the corners sort of pointing at my car, and I couldn't really work out why. But yes, they patched up. They did a good job. Yeah. But that was the very first incident of terrorism that went on for 2-3 years.
Right. And you're still driving now. I'm too polite to ask you how old you are, but the listeners can do the maths, I dare say. But yeah, good for you. Good for you, Molly. And we're going to sit and wait for Jack to arrive with the car, and then we'll come back in a little while and see what happens next.
Hope it'll for him again. Did he have problems, or was it?
I messaged him this morning and he said I'm on my way to go and pick it up, and it's all been checked out, so yeah, it should be okay. But yeah, so there we go. That's part one of this little episode. We'll say goodbye just for now.
Did you?
4 or 5 years ago.
So, dear listener, we are now with the Lagonda. Lagonda's just pulled up. So it's an M45. It's dark green, red leather. And Jack, who is the man who's brought the car along today on behalf of the owner, has just told me that it's the original body. So, a 90-year-old car with its original body. So, and from what we're doing today, that means that this is the very car, the very body that Molly will remember from her childhood.
A really good one, actually. I drive a lot of these, and this is one of the best.
I was going to say, you have other cars that you're...
Yeah, lots of M45s. Yeah.
So, Jack, do you mind if I ask you a little bit about the car, what you know about it?
Sure, yeah, it's an original bodied M45 Tourer. I believe it was delivered originally to the High Street in Oxford.
Oh, okay.
From new. And then I think it had one short ownership, and then changed hands thereafter. So it's nice that it's still in Oxfordshire. It's owned by someone who lives abroad. We recently competed in the 1,000-mile trial and came mid-table. The car was well behaved. And I believe the car did the RAC rally in period.
Oh, okay, right. So period competition history. Yeah. Right. Wasn't your auntie, was it? Did she do any rallying?
I don't think so. I know the car spent quite a lot of time in Germany, on and off, in various parts of Germany. And I can remember I was 8, and I can remember her coming down from London to Berkshire to see us, and I can remember standing next to the car. So This was 84 years ago.
That is amazing, isn't it, really? It really is.
That have been?
1930, just before war broke out, I suppose, 1939. But the family who found the photographs and so on sent me the papers from Sotheby's, which obviously gave a history of the car, and the missing bit was the bit where my aunt had it. So I was able to fill in that gap.
It was your aunt who was the owner?
Yes, my mother's sister. The aunt was my godmother. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So she would have been the second owner, almost certainly.
Well, she lived in Sunbury-on-Thames, and isn't that where Lagonda was built, in Sunbury?
Well, yes. So Staines, yeah, very close by.
Yes. So she would have been the second, not the first.
We'll have to research that.
Yeah, we'll have to work on this, Jack.
My information that the owner keeps is that it was delivered to the High Street in Oxford. But that we might check on that.
Well, one thing I found with pre-war Astons is probably a little bit like it is today. Quite often they had a fairly short first ownership, and then they would go to somebody else. So
as they would now. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so people buy a car and change it a year later, or even less. So yeah, it's not that unusual. But perhaps we'll help, and maybe there's a part 2 of this story.
Which other cars do you have in store, as it were?
Well, we maintain 3 or 4 M45s, Lagondas, 1 or 2 Lagonda rally cars, some WO Bentleys, which is the same era, built by Bentley, and some post-war cars, some XK120s.
And you're away most of the time rally driving, are you?
I do a lot of co-driving and rally support. Yeah.
Whereabouts?
I've been as far as Myanmar, Peru, Argentina.
Yeah.
I've been to Russia and China and Mongolia.
Good heavens! And what sort of distances?
Those rallies are up to 15,000 kilometres.
Really. Really, I used to think I'd like to be not a rally driver, a rally passenger.
Well, there we go. Maybe we could work on that at some point. But I mean, what a great story, really. Here we are, 80-something years later.
Well, I'm so grateful to both of you for taking the time. I really, really am. I can't thank you enough because I know you're both very busy people. So
That's
do
really
appreciate
important.
it very much.
Well, it's your family heirloom, so it's great that you can enjoy it.
Well, as she was my godmother, I'm rather sorry that she didn't bequeath it to me.
Yeah. Mind you, back in the day, it probably wouldn't have been worth as much as it would be today. But no, to be honest, this is what it's all about, history. I mean, when I say historian or history, people glaze over. But, it's not what you think it is. It is about people. It's about the cars, but it's also about the people who owned them and drove them and what they did with them. And today, very, very special. And actually, in a weird way, I think it's quite fitting. Here we are on the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Yeah. So, my head is filled with historical thoughts at the moment. But yeah, and, we're doing something that goes back to that period as well, isn't it, really? So
do you have to periodically take the cars out or see that they're still roadworthy? Or
minimum of once a year. We'll have a couple of weeks once a year. Yeah. We'll do at least 100 miles. To make sure they're okay and then put them away again. Yeah. Some of the cars are out constantly. Some of the rally cars will be out on 3 events per year. So they go to and from the collections to the workshops to the rallies and back again for repair. So they're constantly being used.
I'd love to do rally driving.
I have a Bentley that did 22,000 rally kilometres this year, within a calendar year of today. Yeah,
God.
Just came back from Southeast Asia.
Goodness.
So they really use them.
Yeah. How did you sort of get into this? You obviously started rally driving when you were very young, because you look very young now.
I started as an engineer, repairing the engines. Yeah, and then I was deemed to be a handy person to come along on the events because I could repair them and I can read a map.
Of all the things I would want to do, it would be that. And I love reading maps. I would never look at a sat nav. I just refuse to use one because I like reading maps and I love driving.
Well, it's never too late, Molly, is all I can say. And
fascinating. I'd love to hear about all your travels. I really would.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to leave it there for now. We've got a lot to talk about off microphone. And making history today, folks. Reuniting someone with a car from their family history.
Are you conscious of people actually looking at it when you're driving?
Yeah, it turns heads. Yeah. It really does. It's quite special.
The photograph doesn't sort of show the size, anything like that.
Is it bigger than you remember it?
Much bigger. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny how I often find that things end up being smaller in real life than you remember them. But yeah, it's a big car, isn't it? And when you were younger, I dare say it looked even bigger. But yeah, well, there we go.
You're not very far from here, are you, Jack?
No, just in Ensham. Yeah,
that's what I thought.
And I live in Whitney.
Do you?
Bartle.
Oh, right.
And Molly, you live from here how many miles away?
Less than 20.
Yeah, so there we are. So I haven't seen the car for over 80 years, and it turns out to be within half an hour or less of where you live. Amazing. Well, that's all for now, folks. Thanks ever so much, Jack. Thank you very, very much indeed for bringing the car.
Appreciate this. I know your time is taken up, both of you. I know you're both very busy. I really do want to thank you so much.
That's what it's all about.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Jack.
You're very welcome.
And thanks, Molly, for making all this kind of happen in the first place. So thank you for helping us make a bit of history.
It's been a really exciting day. I just can't believe it's happened.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, back to you, Gary. Literally history in the making.
Thank you, Steve. And wasn't that just marvellous? What a great story. And we must thank Molly and Jack for making this happen. It seemed like such a great day. I think it's absolutely wonderful. If you have a story yourself, it doesn't have to be, an epic. It doesn't have to be 1 or 2 hour long. This is about 25 minutes. It can be shorter, as long as you like. If you have any stories regarding Aston Martin, Lagonda, please do get in touch. Contact us through the AMHT website on the Contact Us form, or send an email to info@amht.org.uk. Don't be shy. You will sound great. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.